One of the biggest wastes in the federal government right now is empty office space and prime real estate. Right now, about half of federal employees actually show up for work in the office. Last year, the vast majority were still working from home, but that did not stop the purchase of brand new office furniture using billions of your taxpayer dollars. Joining us now to discuss this is OpenTheBook.com's Deputy Public Policy Editor, Rachel O'Brien. Good morning to you, Rachel. This is a great example of waste and abuse of the federal government and federal funding. But before we get into these furniture buys, just how empty are these buildings and how much is it costing us?
Yeah, Open the Books has been tracking this for a few years, and now DOGE is working with the General Services Administration to unload these unused buildings and save taxpayer money. So last year, only 6% of the federal workforce were in person on a full-time basis. The average government building were on average 12% occupied. The USDA building, 1400 Independence Avenue Southwest, they have 1.5 million square feet of usable space, capacity of over 7,400 people, but only about 450 people there on a daily basis. Wow. So that's 6% occupied. So the Government Accountability Office has said federal agencies spend about $5 billion a year annually to lease buildings and another $2 billion to operate and maintain federal office buildings, regardless of the building's utilization. So not a single government agency you mentioned was even occupying half of its space. So
it's insane. Billions were spent on brand new furniture. Break down the cost here of that.
Right. So we reported this at the height of the pandemic between 2020 and 2022. $3.3 billion was spent on buying brand new furniture. So Department of Transportation, they only had 9% occupancy, but they still spent $55 million. Department of Justice had 35%, yet they spent $408 million. We went past 2022 and we looked through 2025, fiscal year 25. 2021 through 25, the feds have spent $4.6 billion on furniture, and some of it is stuff that is certainly not needed in any government buildings. We're talking about artwork and drawings and embassies, $1.4 million spent by the State Department for that.
I was reading leather recliners from Ethan Allen.
Expensive Herman Miller office chairs, very expensive furniture that the average American would love to have in their home.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, these buildings are also prime real estate, as we know. How much can be repurposed, and how much would that save the American taxpayer?
So the General Services Administration says it has 440 buildings that aren't for core services like courthouses, facilities for national defense and law enforcement. You're not going to get rid of those. So they say that selling these empty or underutilized spaces can save at least $430 million a year. Now, DOGE says it can save more money. Whether it ends up being more or less, the fact remains that these buildings aren't being used enough to justify the cost. There's also a huge backlog in needed repairs for these federal buildings. As of last year, $370 billion worth of repairs were needed. And so they're not making the repairs on these old buildings. They're sitting unused. There was a congressional subcommittee on DOGE hearing held 2 days ago on reducing this federal real estate portfolio. Our CEO, John Hart, he testified at length about the money spent on this. And this was in a building that was 2% occupancy. Right. So it was a perfect example of what buildings should be absolutely get rid of.
Yeah. He said every dollar saved in Washington is a dream realized somewhere here in America. Very well said during that testimony he gave. All right, Rachel, great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.